we want to obviously to Nuray Mert. I'd like to make two announcements. One is that there is a reception network event next week in the Parliament, 12th of September, for the launch of Center for Turkish Studies website, septus.org. If you want to attend, and please do attend, you can actually register for the event at septus.org and also tell that you want to come and get some more details of it as well. And secondly, you have seen the booklet of the centre. There are some spare copies over there. Please do take one of these with you. It's got a lot of information about past activities. And if you haven't done so already, please leave your email addresses with us so that we can actually keep you up to date and inform you of forthcoming events. Thank you. Now, without further ado, Nuray Mert.
I want to thank Center for Turkish Studies for inviting me for this speech, especially this week when London is so shiny. It's a very rare occasion, and I enjoyed it very much. And secondly, I want to thank you for coming. I think that is that expresses your concern for Turkish politics. This is what I assume actually. And naturally, I'll start with criticism of Turkish democracy, which is expected. But don't think that, and I think that many of you may think that I'm a biased person, being an enemy of governing party, as they call it, and as Murat also presented me, the Prime Minister attacked me directly and declared me as an enemy of government, and then governmental circles currently defining me as a sort of public enemy even, especially because of my concern and criticisms of Turkish question. What's that? So I don't know where to start actually, because I mean, those who come from Turkey or who are related to Turkey must be very familiar with what I'm going to talk about. That Turkey is getting itself into trouble in many ways. There are human rights violations, arrests, limitations of freedoms, and Kurdish question is getting worse and worse. The situation concerning Kurdish question is getting worse and worse. And on top of everything, now there is this crisis concerning Turkish foreign policy about Syrian affair, or Syrian crisis if you like. And these all related to each other in very risky ways, if you like. So I think I should start first to talk about my criticism of how and when it started and why I ended up being labeled as an enemy of Justice and Development Party. Actually, I was among the hopefuls when Justice and Development Party came to power in 2002 general elections. Not because that I was an Islamist or supporter of right-wing politics. Far from it. I've always been leftist from very young age. But I thought that conservatives were living under very unfair suppression in Turkey. And I thought that, like many other democrats, civil and military hegemony, secularist hegemony, pressurized religious rights and life of conservative people, ordinary conservative people, let alone Islamists. It's a long story of this modernization project of the Republican regime and all that. And I thought that it is fair, finally, that Justice and Development Party managed to overcome all difficulties and obstacles and managed to come to power by democratic elections. And then, since then, of course I have been critical of Justice and Development Party, but only because it was an ordinary right-wing party, and I was leftist, and I was critical of their neoliberal economic policies. But my criticism was limited to their being right-wing party, conservative party, especially concerning their economic liberalism and all that. And then, in their first term, actually they were still struggling against military and judicial hegemony, and also secularist cultural hegemony, because cultural hegemony is also a very important force to repress segments of society. In this case, it was very depressing for Turkish conservatives and Islamists, or pious people in general. And but starting from the second term, things started to get changed. Actually, Justice CDP launched a big campaign which is called Ergenekon case, and disclosed some coup d'etat attempts by some generals and their collaborators in media and in different places of society. And that's why they have been supported by Democrats, and everybody avoided to criticize GDP's deficits of democracy, or failures of democracy, if you like, because it was turning to be a one-person party. It was turning to be an absolutist rule within the party and in Turkey in general. But after all, this party faced a closure case as late as 2008. It was proposed by chief prosecutor, and there was this risk of constitutional court could close Justice and Development Party for being, there is this law in Turkey, for being focus of reactionary activities. It sounds really ridiculous. This party was in power for its second term, had a majority vote and very strong social support and everything. And it was far from being focus of any fundamentalism or anything like that, but it was the last expression and attempt of rigid understanding of secularism by judiciary and by secularist state apparatus, secularist status quo, if you like. And then again, I mean, we felt, I and many Democrats felt, to be supportive of GDP against such undemocratic attempts. And fortunately enough, they again managed to overcome this meddling of judiciary. And at the time, anyway, I mean, they had already managed to overcome military attempts or any attempt by the status quo to suppress GDP or to try to weaken them. It was all fine, but again, things were not going well in terms of freedoms, rights and freedoms. and in terms of democratic standards in many fields. And then came this famous referendum debate, the referendum of 2010, was it? 2010. And it was about constitutional amendments. It was a package of amendments aiming to change the structure of judiciary, and supposedly in order to improve the structure of judiciary in the way of more democratic politics. Actually, it was a big debate, political debate in Turkey. People were divided into two, and especially intellectuals and Democrats were divided into two, and polarized very deeply on the question of how to vote, yes or no. And many thought that Democrats should support this governing parties move, because it will be a good step in the way of more democratization in Turkey. I was among those who are critical of yes vote, because anyway, we were thinking that it was the whole constitution should have been changed, rather than through making some cosmetic changes through some amendments. And secondly, I and minority of Democrats, left Democrats in Turkey, we thought that it could result with increasing executive power over judiciary, which would be another step in the way of authoritarian politics in Turkey. And this is what happened actually. And then since then, it was a very critical moment. Since then, since this referendum, since the result of the referendum, of course the majority vote was yes, and the governing party managed to hold all power after changing the structure of judiciary as well. And then it started to get really authoritarian, which could be felt in every field of life. But I know that it sounds extremely abstract and cliche. Those who are not coming from Turkey or not familiar with Turkish politics may think that these are cliches. Everybody is coming from his or her own country and complaining about democracy, and there is no perfect democracy. And looking from outside, Turkey seems and sounds fine comparing with others. I know that this currently, unfortunately, in the beginning of 21st century, world don't look like a heaven for democracy. All over the world there are problems. And comparing with our neighbors, especially, comparing with Iran, Syria and all others, Turkey even may sound and seem like a shining example. And it did for quite a long time to Westerners, and was supported, actually, the Justice and Development Party was supported for being a model of democracy in the region. And I think it's fair to say that, the level of democracy is not comparable with its neighbors, to start with, and with many other non-Western countries. But after all, Turkey has a very long tradition of, despite of all its odds, Turkey has a very long tradition of democracy. So we have higher expectations. And we are getting, rather than improving our standard of democracy, we ended up with dramatic regression. And concerning Kurdish question, it it reminds the dark days of mid-90s concerning treatment of Alevis and excluding, minorities. It sometimes sounds like or seems like 1970s, believe me. I remember those days. And I remember the political discourse of those days. And that's why actually I feel free to suggest that there is a regression of democracy in Turkey, and it should be a matter of concern for those who live in the country and for Europeans who are allies of Turkey. If we don't even consider Turkey's candidacy for membership in EU, still, even if it didn't exist, it should have been important for Europe. What's happening in Turkey, since we are neighbors and allies and all that. We have historical ties and future plans, whatever. So, as I said, you may think that, what is the standard of democracy? I was only a week or 10 days ago reading an obituary on the late Ethiopian leader who died recently, and he was being criticized of his dictatorial ways, and it said that he was quite dictatorial after all, and apparently he arrested hundreds of his opponents, and 10 journalists are in prison in Ethiopia. Comparing to Turkey, it's embarrassing to say, but it's peanuts. In Turkey, more than 8,000 people are in jail, with charge or without charge, for political reasons, mostly Kurds, and also some leftists. And there are how many? More than 2,000 students who are in jail for political reasons again, not for rape, murder, or for ordinary offenses, but for political offenses, reasons. And all numbers, I can multiply numbers and facts, and it may sound more impressive, but most of you here are quite familiar with all these facts and numbers, I suppose. So things are getting more and more alarming for Turkish democracy. But probably I also should remind you that it is not only Justice and Development Party. It has a very long story in Turkey. This ending up very badly story. It is a historical reasons. It has its background in 70s, 60s, and all other developments after that. But what happened to Justice and Development Party is more important at the moment, since it was a sort of turning point, if you like. Since the governing party presented itself as a great transformer of Turkish politics. And actually it could be taken into seriously, not because they were perfect Democrats. They didn't, and they didn't seem so, they didn't sound so. But there was this chance, because after all they were the victims of the previous status quo. And they were against the previous status quo. They were radical critics of the Republican regime and its authoritarian ways. So there was a chance that being victims of Republican authoritarian ways, they could transform Turkish democracy. I was not very optimistic about a right-wing party transforming Turkish politics in terms of more democratization. But after all, I mean, it could be, even I thought that it could be a good dynamic to transform politics, because it was a good historical moment. I mean, Turkey was being encouraged from Western world as well to democratize, to transform its policies. And governing party is also encouraged in its mission of more democratization and all that. So I think that there was a chance. But from the beginning I knew that the problem of Justice and Development Party with the Republican regime is more limited with its secularist policies rather than its authoritarian style or authoritarian aspect, if you like. And their objection of military hegemony was more about the role of army in Turkey as the guardian of secularism, rather than being very militaristic and meddling into civil politics. And that's why actually, after the government party thought that, well, okay, now secularist institutions, guardians and bastions of secularism, once they are stopped, they are taken over, this is democratization. Now there is democracy, because their understanding of democracy coming from 1950s actually, I think it's the same for the whole right-wing parties in Turkey, starting from the introduction of multi-party period in the 50s. Their definition has always been limited with majority rule. And it was not a surprise that GDP also defined democracy along